As part of our activity assessment, we need to understand how data associated with the activity is used in order to identify if there are any risks. ProvePrivacy collects information relating to each of the assets used for the processing of data. We call these information assets. An information asset is an item which contains information used by the organization as part of your data processing activities. An information asset can be as simple as a paper form, such as an application form, or as complex as a computer system. Understanding your information assets allows you to identify where your data is processed and the risks associated with availability, data integrity, or confidentiality. ProvePrivacy helps you to understand where your data is processed and which processing activities are using which assets. This will help you to determine which information assets are important to the activities which your organization undertakes. This, in turn, allows you to assess the risks associated with each information asset and to mitigate these risks where appropriate. Information assets fall into four main categories: systems, electronic documents such as Word documents or spreadsheets, etc., paper-based documentation such as paper forms, or third-party administrators such as off-site file storage companies. The data management assessment allows you to add individual information assets for assessment. You can do this by first adding the name of the information asset and then selecting the information asset type from the drop-down menu. Once you have added this information, click on the Add icon to add the asset to the table. If an information asset has been added to the database as part of a previous assessment on a different activity, this will show in the Information Asset Name field when you begin to type the name. When you have added your information asset, click on the Edit button next to the entry in the table. This will allow you to enter additional details relating to the asset and to undertake the risk assessment. Once you have clicked on the Edit button, you will be taken to the Information Asset Details screen. Here, you will add more details about the asset. The information asset name and information asset type will be completed for you. Add a description of the information asset so that others might understand what the asset is. Then add who the asset owner is and the asset administrator. The owner is likely to be a person in your department who is responsible for the data on the asset, whereas an administrator might be a person responsible for the asset across the organization, such as in IT. If you are not sure who these are, enter your own name. Next, enter details on where the asset is stored. This will be different depending upon the information asset type. For example, if the asset type is a system, the options determine the type of system. Or if the asset type is a paper-based form, the options include the type of storage such as a filing cabinet. The next field determines a more precise storage location. It allows you to enter more details, such as a drive location, or an office location, or web address. Next, we move on to determine what data is stored on the asset and how the data is protected. You should select which type of data subject's data is stored on the asset from the options presented. You should also select the data items being stored on the asset. You will only have the options to select the data subject type from those initially selected as part of this activity. If other data subject types are stored on the same asset as part of another activity, then these will be added on the other activity. You should also select the data classification type from the Data Classification field. you should select the highest classification relevant to your data. Then select how access to the data is restricted. You can select more than one option if required. You can now click the Save button to save your progress so far, and then move on to the data retention section of the assessment. Data retention is an important consideration because it is directly referenced in data protection regulation. One of the principles of data protection law is that personal data should only be retained as long as it is necessary. A data retention period begins when the personal data is no longer required for its original purpose. For example, the original purpose of a HR file is to support the management of an individual employee. Therefore, the data retention period would start once the employee leaves the organization. The data retention period will end when the personal data is no longer required for any other purpose. So, for example, a HR file could be retained for up to 7 years because the data could be needed to support HR regulation. It isn't acceptable to retain personal data with no justification. So, if you are retaining something just in case and cannot provide a rationale, you are most likely retaining data outside of data protection regulation. At the end of the data retention period, there should be a process to review the data and determine if it is still required. If it is not, then there should be a process in place to ensure that the data is deleted. The first thing that we need to understand on the data retention screen is where the personal data associated with this activity is stored whilst it is in retention. If data is being stored on the asset which you are currently assessing, select This Information Asset. If data is being stored on a different asset, for example, it might be packaged up and shipped to an archive vault, select Another Information Asset. Or, if data is not retained beyond its original purpose, select Data is deleted immediately. ProvePrivacy provides some guidance as to when a retention period might start and end, as well as providing a justification in some cases. You can access this guidance by using the Data Retention Schedule lookup field. First, select the appropriate category and then select the subcategory. Then finally select the record type from the What is the type of record being retained field. This will automatically populate the retention period fields. If you find that the guidance has completed information which is contrary to your own data retention schedule, or if you cannot find an entry which matches your asset, you can enter details into the data retention fields manually. Now click on the Save button to save your changes. Once the save is complete, click on the Data Management button in the top left of your screen to return to the Data Management table. To find out how the ProvePrivacy platform could help resolve your data challenges, get in touch or book your free demo today.